Good morning. I'm Don Llewellyn, livestock specialist for, statewide, and also county director here of Lincoln County Extension in Davenport. So today I'm going to talk about basically this whole thing from the animal standpoint. So what the animal thinks and figures out when they walk into the pasture and so forth. So anyway, let's start out. How many of you are cattle people? Okay, we've got some. Okay, how many of you would like to be cattle people? Actually, a little over a year ago, Aaron asked that question in the growers meeting when you first introduced the L-tear, right? And there was, quite a lot of producers in the room, but there was also quite a bit of interest. So hopefully, we'll provide something here that's interesting. So anyway, I'm going to take it from the animal standpoint. The agronomists, the soil scientists, and everybody here are going to tackle that part, but my part is the animals. Okay, so when we think about forage production, just in general, basically in this dryland situation, our moistures are a limiting factor, and so our plants, whether they've adapted or whether we select them, we have to, for these multifunction crops, we have to find something that's adapted to limited resources, because it's not like where I was in Kentucky, for example, where we get 4 inches of rain a month. Here, it's limited, and we have a lot of different seasonal patterns of growth, and we're going to look at that here in just a minute too. You already seen these pictures. I threw these in here, and I didn't know how many you will have seen. So this is probably pretty well wore out. But this guy right here, I think he was eating a turnip when I was out there in the field. So I got a little bit of a close up and showing what they're doing when they get into those paddocks. So, what can we use for these multifunction or cover crops, whatever you want to call them? Okay, so back in the days several years ago, we did some work at WSU. This was actually at the Prosser station, where we were looking at canola for dual purpose canola, where we would graze it off or take silage in the fall of winter canola, and then we'd go and take that on to bear seed later on. And so that was an interesting project, but here we're talking about grazing. If you want to see about that, there's some fact sheets at WSU Publications that talk about it. But we can use canola or mustards in this particular study out here in Davenport, the Wilkie Farm. There's turnips. Okay, so that's where one of our components of the mix. Legumes, were those winter pea? That was winter pea and spring pea. Okay, and they didn't mention it, but the spring pea in the mixes out here at the Wilkie Farm, it didn't really do too good. It was pretty much dried up by the time the animals ever entered. Okay, and so as I go through this stuff, I'm going to talk about what I saw out there, and try to make some sense of what those animals were doing based on the diversity of the plants that were out there. Anyway, these are just other options, within the legumes. I should have said, the brassicas, they're when they're actively growing, they're a high protein feed, just like the legumes are. And so we can see proteins up there in that 17, 18%, which is good if you're making this in complementary to some other lower quality feeds as well. We also did some work with cereal grains, triticale and barley. We had some oats in our studies and so forth. This is over by Moses Lake in one of our triticale studies, and those are fairly good cereals to put into mixes as well, okay? So let's start talking about, and then also we can do companion cropping as well. This is canola with some cereal in there as well. So here we go to the blends, okay? Okay, so this is a little bit of a busy deal, but I really like this graph. This was out of one of our pasture manuals that's going to be published here just within days or a few weeks. But when we look up here at these series, basically out here at the Wilkie farm, when we were looking at these different crops to go in this blend, you can see our warm season annuals and cool season and legumes fit pretty nicely in there because they're pretty productive during the middle of the summer, right? They grow well during the hot part of the year. If we went out there and put a bunch of cool season annuals, you know, that's the blue line, not as productive during that time of year. So we have to be thinking about those things and when those particular crops are going to mature in relation to when those animals are going to be in there. Just like the peas didn't work so well, they were all dried up and they hardly put any pods on at all. And so for the future, that kind of tells us that probably wasn't the best choice. But if we can go in here and pick crops that are productive during what we would think of as the summer slump, just in pasture or rangeland, those might fit pretty well, okay? The physiology of these plants, basically all this says is both grasses and legumes, as they move towards vegetative maturity, fiber is gonna go up and basically protein's gonna go down. So what does that tell us? Yes, sir. You bet. Okay, warm season annuals. Okay, he's asking, you know, what would be examples of warm season annuals and so forth. Okay, a warm season annual could be sorghum Sudan. Okay, what was the other one that you wanted me? You said. Right. If you go back into some of those other plants, like your clovers, and some of those would grow well in the summertime, in your brassicas. Let's see, what would you have in your brassicas? Look, your clovers, your hairy vetch. Let's see, those are mostly cool here, except for your sorghum and sorghum Sudan. Okay. Yep. Good question. Okay. So I was talking about how as these plants move towards vegetative maturity, fiber goes up. What does that mean? Okay. In ruminants, we use the neutral detergent system, or the detergent system. Neutral detergent fiber is the cellulose and the hemicellulose. And there's a fairly good relationship between neutral detergent fiber and those animals' intake, okay? ADF is mainly the cellulose and the anti-quality components along with that as well. It's a subset of NDF. And there's a really good relationship between ADF and digestibility. So as NDF and ADF go up, intake's going to go down, and digestion will probably go down, okay, to a certain degree. On the other hand, as protein goes down, as those plants reach physiological maturity, then we have to start thinking about where we're going to get our protein from. Okay, so That's basically what this is saying. It's just the changes in the nutrition for the cow based on the maturity of the plant. Okay. Take home message here. When those animals walked into that field up at the Wilkie farm, the first thing they did is they started to try to select the diet that they wanted, right? They're going to be attracted to their first choice. They don't go out there with just reckless abandon and just start eating, okay? If you put, just for example, if you put those cattle in a monoculture of high quality grass, let's say they just put them out on a wheat pasture or something like that, they're going to select a diet that's probably 3 or 4 percentage points higher in protein than if you just went out there and clipped the grass. So they're not just out there in reckless abandon. They're actually doing what they want, eating what they want. Now, on the other hand, the longer they stay in the pasture or the paddock or whatever, their diet changes over time. So if it's a small paddock and they go out there the first day and they're eating all kinds of stuff that they really like, then that tells us the next day their diet's not going to be quite as high in quality as it was the first day, right? So the retention time, the longer they stay in that paddock, their quality of their diet is declining. So that's why we think in a lot of ways it's better to have cattle in for a short period of time quickly and get them out quickly and rotate more often, right? Does that make sense? Okay. This right here is just showing, in various different kinds of plants. Okay. Different kinds of plants. We would only graze to a certain level so that we would have better recovery, okay? And so in this case, we were trying to destroy let's not call destroy, let's call terminate the multifunction crop or cover crop, if you will. And so we can pretty much eat this down. But if we want our crop to recover, we have to keep the reserves in the roots and the crown and so forth, so it can. I've only got just a few minutes, and I want to get up here to this. Here's the whole crux of the deal. When you are grazing some of these crops, they're high in moisture. And sometimes if you don't have enough dry matter in the diet, these animals will hit a bullseye at 40 feet, okay? So what we have to do as nutritionists is we have to make sure that there's enough dry matter in the diet. So let's take just the canola, for example. Awesome protein, dry matter is very low, 12% dry matter. The rest of it's water. Neutral detergent fiber is low. What could be wrong with that? We always calculate intake with our animals on a dry matter basis. So if a 600-pound steer is supposed to eat 2.8% of body weight of a high quality feed like this, that's 16.8 pounds of dry matter. But what is that on an as-fed basis? Here's one of the pitfalls. You convert that dry matter to as-fed with all that moisture, 131 pounds. If I don't send anything home with you other than this today, understand that animals can be in feeds that are so wet that they can't eat enough to meet their nutrient requirements. So we move forward to this. Remember, Aaron and Sheikah were talking about there was the CRP grass. This was probably as critical to the animal performance as the cover crops themselves or the multifunction crop. That's where they got the dry matter that they needed. The dry matter content of that forage mix was only 25%. the dry matter content of that complementary grass was 63%. It's almost 64%. So that's where they got the dry matter. That's where they were able to take in enough nutrients to be able to gain. We've seen them be out on the canola and gain nothing because they couldn't get enough dry matter in their diet. Okay, so that's a really take-home messages. Cautions: we worry about nitrates accumulation in these crops. Grass tetany can be an issue in these crops. Sulfur toxicity in the brassicas, especially, we will see high sulfur contents. I've seen canola with 1.3% sulfur on a dry matter basis, and the toxic level is only 0.4%. So if you're feeding a feed like that, you're going to have to blend it with. They're going to have to get some dry matter from somewhere else. Prussic acid, if you get into sulfur or the sorghums and the sorghum Sudans, that's something else we have to worry about. And that's it. Any questions?
Hey, Don, we got one from online. Blow blocks, were those ever utilized? That might be a question for Aaron as well.
Blow blocks were not.